In early 2026, the global economy felt like it was just coasting. The forecast was for calm seas, maybe even falling energy prices. But then, in the span of just 1 week, a sudden military conflict didn't just rock the boat, it threatened to sink the whole thing. Let's break down exactly how that happened.
Just look at this contrast. I mean, it's night and day. In January, everyone was expecting an oil surplus. The big prediction was prices falling, maybe even down towards $58 a barrel. Fast forward to the first week of March, and that entire reality gets flipped on its head. We were suddenly staring down an acute shortage, with prices exploding past $82. All the market's expectations completely shattered, practically overnight.
So, that's the big question, right? How did this happen? How did one regional conflict send such devastating shockwaves through the entire global system in just a handful of days? Well, that's the question we're going to dig into right now. Okay, so it all begins with a single spark. A massive, coordinated military operation that just changed everything, flipping the world completely upside down. The escalation was just terrifyingly fast. I mean, look at this timeline. February 28th, the US and Israel launched this Operation Epic Fury against Iran. Less than 24 hours later, Iran hits back. But here's the key. They don't go after military targets. Nope, they aim right for the economic jugular, the region's energy infrastructure. And then, by day 3, they make this devastating strategic move, declaring the world's most important oil choke point, the Strait of Hormuz, completely closed. And they weren't bluffing. And that single move, closing the strait, triggered the first and most powerful ripple. It basically paralyzed a critical artery of the entire global economy. To really get your head around this, you have to understand the numbers. We're talking about up to 20 million barrels of oil flowing through this one narrow waterway every single day. Think about that. That's a staggering 20% of the entire planet's daily consumption of both oil and natural gas. 1/5 of the world's energy has to squeeze through this single choke point. And this one really highlights the incredible vulnerability we're talking about. For all the oil that gets physically moved by ship across the oceans, a full third of it has no choice but to navigate the Strait of Hormuz. There's just no other way around it. So the impact was instantaneous. You can see it right here. Traffic just plummeted to zero, leaving over 150 ships completely stranded. But it wasn't just a physical barrier. The financial wall went up too. War risk insurance premiums, the cost to even dare go near there, exploded by up to 500%. And get this, if your ship had any link to the US, the UK, or Israel, your rate was 3 times higher than anyone else's. Suddenly, the route was both physically and financially impossible. But the crisis went way beyond just stopping ships. The second ripple was a direct kinetic assault on the energy infrastructure that feeds those ships in the first place. And that sent global markets into a complete tailspin. Iran's strategy here was asymmetric and devastatingly effective. They used drones and missiles to hit the absolute crown jewels of Gulf energy. They shut down operations at Qatar's Ras Laffan, which is basically the world's epicenter for LNG, and they took out Saudi Arabia's massive Ras Tanura refinery. This was a systematic takedown of the region's ability to supply energy to the rest of us. And you can just see the panic on Wall Street. Look how quickly the financial world had to react. All these institutions that were predicting oil in the low 60s, they were forced to literally tear up their models. All of a sudden, $80 a barrel was the new floor, with major players like UBS and Wood Mackenzie warning that, hey, if this drags on, prices could easily blow past $100. So this price shock then creates a third, much bigger ripple, a painful domino effect that starts to knock over entire national economies, especially the ones that really rely on imported energy. India is a perfect and really painful case study of this. The price surge immediately blows up their import bill. A $10 rise adds $14 billion in costs. That, in turn, weakens their currency, which makes imports even more expensive. And finally, that pain hits the streets. Domestic inflation, especially for food, starts to climb. It's just a brutal, unavoidable chain reaction. Now, China found itself in this uniquely difficult spot. On the one hand, they're Iran's biggest customer, relying on all that cheap Iranian oil. But on the other, the blockade Iran just created was choking off over 30% of China's total oil imports. So you had Beijing in this bizarre position, trying to condemn the U.S. attacks, while at the same time pressuring Iran to please let the ships through. And in all this chaos, there was one very clear geopolitical winner: Russia. Before this war kicked off, its energy revenues were actually collapsing. This crisis reversed that trend overnight. The price surge handed them a massive financial windfall, which directly helped them fund their ongoing war in Ukraine. Just a stunning turn of events. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. Beyond all the obvious economic shocks, the conflict was triggering these dangerous, hidden ripples, crises that threatened the very basics of human survival: food and water. Yeah, everyone was watching the price of a barrel of crude oil. But the truly existential threats, the ones that could cause a complete societal collapse, they were developing almost completely unnoticed, hiding in plain sight. Now, to understand this next threat, you have to know about desalination. In the super dry Gulf region, this isn't some luxury technology, it's not optional. For millions of people, it's the only thing standing between them and a catastrophic water shortage. It is their primary and in some cases only source of drinking water. And this led to two absolute nightmares. First, a fertilizer crisis. The strikes on Qatar shut down a production hub that supplies almost half the world's urea right before spring planting. That guarantees future food shortages. But even more terrifying was the water crisis. Any kind of oil spill in the enclosed Gulf could make desalination impossible. And when you learn that nations like Qatar only have about 3 to 5 days of water reserves, well, you're looking at a swift and total humanitarian catastrophe. So, ultimately, the world was left staring at two completely different futures. If the crisis somehow got resolved in a few weeks, the damage would probably be manageable, a flesh wound. But if it dragged on for months, we'd be looking at sustained oil prices way over $100, entrenched stagflation, and a very, very high risk of a synchronized global recession. And all of this leaves us with one final critical question. A shock like this is a perfect reminder of how dangerous it is to rely on fossil fuels from unstable regions. But does the economic pain actually accelerate the green transition? Or does the high cost and sheer political distraction of a global crisis stop that momentum dead in its tracks? That's the huge dilemma we're now all forced to confront.